on today's day, 50 years ago, Time magazine came with an issue. Title page of it was, Is God Dead? Is God dead?
Well, I think, you know, if we look at it as a concept, it's certainly dead in a lot of people's minds. If somebody says it's not raining and it's raining, it doesn't change the fact that it's raining. And I think that the Quran says, let's wait it out. تَرَبَّصُوا فَإِنِّي مَعَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُتَرَبِّصِينَ. It says to the atheist, and the kafir is really an atheist at heart. It says to the atheist, let's wait it out, just wait it out. You know, but atheism is a position. For me, I prefer agnostics. I actually have some sympathy for atheists, and this is why. And I think God, in some way, must have some sympathy for them, because the only people that remember God as much as believers are atheists.
Well,
like, they take God seriously, and I think that is such a compliment to God that at least they take Him seriously. And one of the interesting things about atheists is, in some ways, their idea of God is so great that they can't believe in Him. They're disappointed. It's like unrequited love. Like, I can't believe you could do this. It's you know, Ivan and Ilyosha's discussion. You know, how can children suffer? One of the things in our tradition, we have, don't think that God has to do what you want. And then it says, haven't you seen how children suffer?
But you're not troubled by that.
By children suffering?
Yeah,
as a human being, I have to be troubled by it.
Right.
I mean, I would be sick. I'd be one of those sociopaths if I wasn't. I mean, if I see my son, I worry about my sons. Like, if my wife says, I say, where's Isaac? She went to the bathroom. I run to the bathroom because I've read too much about what happens in bathrooms, you know. So I run to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You know? I would hate to see, you know, especially defilement of children. I mean, to me, that is one of the truly great crimes worthy of hell.
But I mean, in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, you have this figure of Job. Job.
Yeah, it's a great story.
It's an amazing story in the sense that in the end of this story, Job has insisted that he was not in the wrong.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Not quite that he didn't do anything wrong, but that he wasn't in the wrong so much as to suffer.
Yeah, his friends were telling him, you deserve this, that's the only possible.
But the interesting part of it, that the end of the story, God says, Job has spoken rightly of me.
Right.
When Job kind of struggled, rebelled.
Right.
Is there some sense in which this
he
kind of...
But he didn't speak the truth. He spoke rightly. I mean, that's it's an adverb.
Right.
Yeah. Because he might have spoken his truth.
So you don't think
and that... Because you can speak rightly and be wrong. Maybe. I mean, that's...
But I think what I'm after is whether suffering is not kind of a wound in our existence that will remain so just in the light of our faith in God until clarity comes at the end of the ages.
Well, one of the things about Abrahamic tradition is the Abrahamic traditions didn't really develop a concept of karma.
Yeah.
It's not really like in Hinduism, it's much easier for them to grasp these things. But there's certainly an element working. When people say, the Quran, for instance, says, no soul bears the sins of another soul. Ibn Arabi said that that's only in the next world. It's not in this world. But people do bear the sins of other people. The Quran also says, beware of tribulations that don't just afflict the innocent, but that don't just afflict the guilty, but afflict the innocent as well.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, suffering, we learn a great deal from suffering. And I'm not going to justify the heinous crimes and these things, but and this is for some people very, very glib response to the suffering, but free will is a package deal. You know, there's people that say, oh, why didn't God smite that person who was going to shoot those children at Sandy Hook Elementary School? Well, why didn't he break your hand when you were cheating on your tax returns? You know, why didn't your tongue suddenly be paralyzed when you were telling those horrible lies to your wife? It's a package deal. And so, in that way, much of what we see in human suffering is from what our own hands have wrought. And that's very much a Quranic motif. And this is why Muslims historically were not as troubled. Now you can say, well, what about the children? They didn't deserve to do that. We're the caretakers of the children. And that's again free will. We are the caretakers. So when the atheist says, where's God in all this? Our response is, where are God's people?
And in some ways, I mean,
like we have moral responsibility.
I guess I would say I think we are on the same page here. I would say in some ways that that there is kind of a push even in the heart of a theist. It's a struggle with God for God, rather than, so to say, struggle against God. But I think you said something which I thought very, very interesting, namely that an atheist is closer to God in denying God than the person who is indifferent.
I've never met an atheist that can't start talking about God within the first couple minutes of a conversation.
Then that's a relationship, right?
And they're taking God seriously. And it's all these so-called believers that don't, you know, God's just a errand boy. Like fulfilling my desires, you know. And a lot of people lose their faith. I mean, there's a 60s song that said, you say you lost your faith, you know it's not like that. You had no faith to begin with and you know it. You know, I mean, I struggle with that concept of losing faith personally. And I've met people that have lost their faith.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, and I don't know if this is, you know, atheists consider this some kind of disease in our brains. But for me, to deny God is just, it's something I cannot imagine. And the way I look at it is, He created us, God, and I apologize for the gender usage. Some people take offense to that, but the Quran uses that, whereas our understanding of God is absolutely genderless. We don't believe in any gender. But God, we are the dominion of God. And I remember one of my teachers was paralyzed. And I'll never forget this. I was about 19. I was in the United Arab Emirates and I was studying Arabic. And he was a beautiful man from Mosul, from Iraq, Abdurrahman Sanjari. And we went to see him because he'd had a stroke. And this was like, he'd just gotten home from the hospital. Half his body was paralyzed. And I remember him literally saying, Subhanallah, you know, glory to God. Look at that. I could move that yesterday and I can't move it today. And it was not contrived. He was in a type of witnessing that was really powerful because we could all feel it. Like he was marveling at what had been done to him.
And that's why you would say that Job did not speak truthfully. The truthful speech about God would be a marvel over what one has suffered.
You've studied Islam pretty well, so you know we have big debates about attributing certain things to prophets. I mean, the Old Testament has things that historically Muslim theologians and the Quran rejects. So it's a little more...
But if you do like Job did, you can be speaking rightly about, you can be speaking truthfully about God.
Well, I mean, like Yunus in the Quran and also in the Bible, but Yunus takes responsibility and says, Subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin, I was a wrongdoer. Even though and this is the position for us, is always to go back to ourselves. The reason that Adam was given the caliphate and Iblis was not is because Iblis blames God. The devil blames God and says, you led me astray, you did this to me. And Adam says, I made a mistake. And he takes he doesn't blame. And so that's a very powerful motif in our tradition, is the idea of always looking at the self. I mean, one of the things that Dr. King said in the letter from the Birmingham jail is that if you want to stand up to the tyrant, make sure you look into yourself and see, do you have any of those qualities? I mean, there are many, like, you know, in the Muslim world, you have a lot of tyrannical households. And so if you have a tyrant over you, you have to ask yourself the question, you know, is this a reflection? America, you know, we've become, all you have to do is watch modern television to know that we've become almost a nation of complete idiots, because anybody that could watch a lot of what it passes as popular television has to have completely surrendered their intelligence. And I remember I was with my father, who is one of the most erudite people that I've ever met. And I took my boys to see, we were at SeaWorld. And I had been taken as a youngster by my grandmother. And I remembered it was much more nature-based. And this one was all really stupid sitcom type things with these incredibly dignified animals. And it always bothers me when people put stupid dresses on animals and things like that, because animals are so dignified. And to degrade them like we degrade ourselves is just so unjust. But it really troubled me, and I turned to my father and I said, what is this? He said, this is 60 years of television.
Well, entertainment we have become very much an entertainment-oriented culture. But let me turn back to question of God.
Well, doesn't it trouble you? I mean, you talk about suffering. That to me is suffering.
Oh, it troubles me. It troubles me a great deal.
That to me is, you know, I was just at the hotel. One of the books they had out just on it's kind of these phony libraries they like to put in. You know, but I picked up this book, and it was a novel from, I don't know, 100 years ago, and it had a character in there who was on a ship, and he was learning grammar. And he'd memorized a book of grammar. And then he had this dog-eared copy of the Bible and of Charles Dickens. You know, and it was like this yeoman, like, or rather sailor, sorry. And just a simple person. But this was what, you know, Thoreau finds this farmer reading Homer in Greek, out there just farming his land in Massachusetts. And I think what we've lost in our civilization in terms of just the pleasure derived from real beauty is something to me that I think troubles me as much as a lot of these other things that people are troubled by. And this is a direct result of choices that people have made, you know.
So that covered the choices related, as you see them, from what you described as the purpose of God, of our existence. And the purpose of our existence, you said, is to know God, to be aware of God, or as Islam puts it, as you put it also, to submit to God. So, can you trace the...
Yeah, and to submit to God is not, you know, this idea of being a servant of God, which is also a New Testament term. It's a very similar term as the Arabic Abdullah, you know, to be a servant of God. It's knowledge of God in our tradition is first and foremost, one has to know the self, because we have been made in the metaphysical image of reality. And the soul, which in our understanding is indivisible, and yet it controls this body. And so in our own selves is a model for us to come to know reality. And this is why the Quran says, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. In your own souls, don't you see? Don't you see? And so coming to, we have a tradition, it's apocryphal, but it's used in many books, that he who knows himself knows his Lord.
So does the knowledge of God always go through the knowledge of self, or is it vice versa?
Always
that in the light of knowledge
always
of
through
God,
knowledge of self. Self, the signs in the self and on the horizon. The Quran says, we will show them our signs in the self and on the horizon until it becomes clear to them what truth is. Al-Haq, which is the name of God. The horizon is a meeting place between heaven and earth. The human being is a meeting place between heaven and earth. In the 33rd chapter of Quran, it says, surely in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the differences of your tongues and your complexities, are signs for people who of knowledge of God, of knowledge. And the relationship between the heavens and the earth and tongues and complexion is that language is a celestial thing. And this is one of the ways of knowing God is through language. And that's why there's a revelation which is words. I mean, this verse, if you look, that God taught Adam all the names. Fakhruddin al-Razi said, what he taught Adam to do was to see the one in the many, to see the universal. And if I say, this is a glass, it's not a glass, it's actually a plastic. It's plastic, but I call it a glass. It doesn't matter if I ask you to bring me a glass, it doesn't matter what type of glass you bring me, because you have the concept, the one in the many. And to see the one behind the many is one of the reasons why we've been given this gift of seeing the universal in the particular. We don't use that term anymore. People talk about kinds and classes today.
So you don't need revelation?
Well,
so
this
God
is a debate.
is kind of present to you as God, as an object in the world?
This is a debate amongst scholars. The Maturidi theologians argue that natural theology is possible and that you can come to know the oneness of God in truth. I tend to incline towards that view. The Ash'ari tend to argue that revelation is absolutely necessary. Revelation, the gift of revelation is in knowing the measurements. Like, we all know that charity is good if you're a decent person, like helping others is a good thing. But how much is an obligation? Like, that's part of the blessing of revelation, is like in the Quran, it's 10% if your crops are come about by rain. It's only 5% if you have to do all the aqueducts and the irrigation. And then you have, out of every 5 camels, you have to give one. It's all worked out in that way. So it's very detailed.
And so you said purpose of human existence
like
is...
we give 1/40 of our standing wealth. We have to, tithing. Like every Muslim has to give 1/40 every year of their standing wealth if they're an adult and they have that wealth. So that's one of the benefits of revelation. Another is how to pray. Like for me, one of the great gifts of Islam is the 5 prayers a day, because I have learned to truly love dawn and even pre-dawn.